I wouldn't be shocked.
No, you can go. All right.
You know what I'm going to say? You're going to need to get out there. I want to help you get good shots. You can tell me honestly.
Get the band back together. Like that. Laughing at it.
No, I'm not coming around justifying, I'm coming around. No.
I can confirm it is the independent group.
They are literally here.
Luke, let me get behind you. Brightest thing in the room. You are actually right. Yeah, that's exactly.
Everyone with a seat, can you please take your seat? They're just coming down the corridor. Keep them miles away,
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us here today. My name is Luciana Berger, and I am the Labour and... I am the Member of Parliament for Liverpool Wavertree. This morning, we have all now resigned from the Labour Party. This has been a very difficult, painful, but necessary decision. We represent different parts of the country. We are of different backgrounds. We were born of different generations, but we all share the same values. From today, we will all sit in Parliament as a new independent group of MPs. For my part, I have become embarrassed and ashamed to remain in the Labour Party. I have not changed. The core values of equality for all, opportunity for all, anti-racism against all, and social justice, the values which I hold really dear and which led me to join the Labour Party as a student almost 20 years ago, remain who I am. And yet these values have been consistently and constantly violated, undermined and attacked, as the Labour Party today refuses to put my constituents and our country before party interest. I cannot remain in a party that I have today come to the sickening conclusion is institutionally anti-Semitic. It was nearly a year ago that we saw the unprecedented event of a minority community, the Jewish community, taking to Parliament Square to demonstrate against the Labour Party, to say enough is enough. And yet since then, despite a mountain of evidence, we have only seen the situation of racism against Jewish people get worse. The leadership has willfully and repeatedly failed to address hatred against Jewish people within its ranks. And it is for these reasons and many more that I have made this decision today. I am leaving behind a culture of bullying, bigotry, and intimidation. I look forward to a future serving with colleagues who respect each other and who are committed to working together for our great country. We will publish a full statement setting out our position shortly, copies of which will be available at the end of this morning's event and on our website. My colleagues, who I'm also proud to call my friends, will now set out the reasons why they have each come to this decision, the principles and values by which we are guided, and how we intend to operate going forward as a new independent group of MPs. We will, of course, take your questions after everyone has spoken. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you, Luciana. My name is Chris Leslie. I'm the Member of Parliament for Nottingham East. This has not been an easy decision for any of us. We've all been Labour members of Parliament for very many years, in my case, more than 3 decades. But the Labour Party we joined, that we campaigned for and believed in, is no longer today's Labour Party. We did everything we could to save it, but it has now been hijacked by the machine politics of the hard left. As Luciana said, our values haven't changed. We absolutely oppose this Conservative government and desperately want an alternative which tackles the barriers of poverty and discrimination by extending opportunity for all. But British politics is now well and truly broken. And in all conscience, we can no longer knock on doors and support a government led by Jeremy Corbyn or the team around him. Why? Well, for a start, the evidence of Labour's betrayal on Europe is now visible for all to see, offering to actually enable this government's Brexit, constantly holding back from allowing the public a final say. Conference policy has been cast aside, no guaranteed full participation in the single market anymore, no exact same benefits, no movement towards a people's vote. Choosing to stand by while our constituents' lives and future opportunities are hurt by Brexit is a fundamental violation of Labour's traditional values. But our differences go far deeper than Brexit. The past 3 years have confirmed how irresponsible it would be to allow this leader of the opposition to take the office of Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Many people still in the Labour Party will privately admit this to be true, but we owe it to our constituents now to say it publicly and honestly. The pursuit of policies that would threaten our national security through hostility to NATO, the refusal to act when needed to help those facing humanitarian distress, preferring to believe states hostile to our country rather than believing our police and security services, these are all rooted in the Labour leadership's obsession with a narrow, outdated ideology. They're hostile to business, large and small. They make impossible promises which everybody knows in their hearts couldn't be kept without putting the economy at risk. And they constantly pit one part of society against another, because to them the world divides between oppressor and oppressed, class enemies, when in truth the modern world is more complicated than this. And then, as Luciana was saying, there is an appalling culture. Intolerance, closing down of debate, abuse and hatred online, as you're seeing this morning, and offline in party meetings, and antisemitism. So we have no choice but to say collectively, enough is enough. There has to be a better way forward, and there can be a better way forward. Thank you. Angela.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Chris. My name is Angela Smith. I am the MP for Penistone and Stocksbridge in South Yorkshire. I was born to a Labour family in 1961. My father was a printer by trade, and my mother started work when I was a teenager, eventually moving on to a job as a receptionist in the NHS. For my parents, working class pride was not about enjoying poverty and wearing it as a badge of honour. It was about self-respect and believing that we could do better, that there was nothing wrong in getting on in life. In 1966, when many other 5-year-olds rooted for England in the World Cup, I had my first experience of political identity when my mother told me there was a different competition going on and that we supported a man called Harold Wilson. My family believed that Labour represented their interests and their values at Westminster. Underpinning that belief was a sense that Labour would help those who faced discrimination and barriers when it came to bringing out the best in themselves. Let me tell a brief personal story to illustrate the point. I went to a village primary and was recommended by my teachers for the top stream at our newly formed local comp. It was 1972. Imagine then my parents' dismay when I was placed in the secondary stream. My mother was encouraged to complain to the head teacher, who could not deny that decisions on the limited places available in the top tier had been based partly on where we came from. We lived in a council house. After one term at my new school, I was advanced to the A stream, but unfortunately, the damage was done. I doubted my academic ability and it hindered progress. It was only when I became an adult that I started to believe in myself, and at 29, graduated from Nottingham University with a good first degree. That process was long and difficult and entrenched my belief that nobody should be judged by where they come from. Nobody should have to work 2, 3, 4 times as hard to develop his or her talents and abilities. We all have something to offer, whoever we are. Most people are like my family. They do not want to be patronised by left-wing intellectuals who think that being poor and working class constitutes a state of grace. What they do want is a fair crack of the whip and opportunities to succeed. They also believe that everyone in our country bears a responsibility to make a contribution towards keeping our society safe and prosperous. But these values are no longer valid in today's Labour Party. And that's why I have made the very painful decision to resign my membership and become an independent MP with my colleagues and friends here today. Gavin will now talk about our shared values.
Thank you, Angela. My name is Gavin Shuker, and I'm, since 2010, been the Member of Parliament for Luton South. This is my first and only job in politics. Representing my hometown is a great honour, and I stepped up to do it because for me, serving your community in that way is public service. We're leaving the Labour Party, not only because of what it's become, but because, like millions of others, we find that our values no longer find expression in today's broken politics. We believe ours is a great country. Perhaps more importantly, so do the vast majority of the British people. We believe that our first duty is to do what it takes to keep people safe. We don't think every problem in the world is created by the West. In fact, we're proud of our values, home and abroad. We want to work with other countries around the world to tackle our shared challenges, not turn our face against them. We believe that a strong economy delivers the best public services and that government is the custodian of money that others have worked hard to earn. We back well-regulated business, but in return we expect them to provide decent, secure and well-paying jobs. We believe in the innate creativity of individuals. People are powerful and they're capable of taking responsibility in their own lives. They should. And government should work to remove the barriers of poverty, prejudice and discrimination that hold all too many back. We believe in strong democratic institutions, a free press, the rule of law and a politics that doesn't only bow to the loudest voices. We're sent to Parliament to exercise our best judgment and provide leadership. We're representatives accountable to those that elect us. And we believe that these are values that are shared by the majority of the British people, our friends and our neighbours. These are values that once would have been considered mainstream in our parties of government, but not anymore. Today they seek to set our communities against one another, poisoning our debate and dividing our country. At the root of today's broken politics lie our broken political parties, guilty of a willful failure of action and an abdication of responsibility. The complete absence of leadership at the moment our country needs it most. Competing visions of the past, providing no hope for Britain's future. To express these values in today's Labour Party is no longer possible. It's turned its back on the British public, their hopes and ambitions. That is why we've taken this step today.
Thank you, Gavin. Good morning, everybody. I'm Anne Coffey, the Member of Parliament for Stockport, a town I've represented for nearly 27 years. It is a great privilege to be an MP. My father died a year before I was elected. He would have been proud to see the chance for a better life he had fought to give me, realised in an achievement beyond his dreams. He believed passionately in education. But without the Wilson's government's commitment to providing alternative routes to higher education through expanding places in polytechnics, I would not have got a degree. Hope and determination of an individual by itself is not enough. I spent 20 years working as a social worker with families, but social work cannot be a response to inequality and lack of opportunity. I joined the Labour Party 41 years ago to elect governments that understood that real opportunity for families only comes when the right policies are in place. I am proud of the achievements of the last Labour government. I thought I would be in the Labour Party for the rest of my life. But political parties are not an end in themselves in a parliamentary democracy. The Labour Party has lost sight of this. It is no longer a broad church. Any criticism of the leadership is responded to with abuse and accusations of treachery. Antisemitism is rife and tolerated. The current leadership have been very successful at changing this party beyond recognition, and in doing so is failing the people who have supported the Labour Party all their lives and who I joined to help. Loyalty cannot be an end in itself, so I leave the party with great sadness, but in hope that we as an independent group can start to change a political system in which people feel they have no voice. I remain totally committed to continuing to serve my constituents. Our values haven't changed, my values haven't changed.
I'm Mike Gapes, the Member of Parliament for Ilford South. I've always considered myself Labour to my core. I grew up in a working class family in a council house in Chigwell, Essex. My dad was a postman and trade union branch secretary. My mum worked in a newsagent shop. My parents, my education at Buckershill County High School, a year I spent as a voluntary service overseas teacher in Swaziland before I went to Cambridge University, all taught me the importance of fighting racism, poverty and injustice. I joined the Labour Party more than 50 years ago in 1968. I've been active at all levels since then, from young socialist branch treasurer to chair of the National Organisation of Labour Students, and I worked for 15 years in the Labour Party headquarters, including as head of the international section of the party. And since 1992, I have been the Labour and Cooperative Member of Parliament for Ilford South. I am sickened that the Labour Party is now a racist, anti-Semitic party. I'm furious that the Labour leadership is complicit in facilitating Brexit, which will cause great economic, social and political damage to our country. Jeremy Corbyn and those around him are on the wrong side on so many international issues, from Russia to Syria to Venezuela. A Corbyn Labour government would threaten our national security and international alliances. Now, this is personally very difficult for me. I've got lots of very good friends locally, nationally and internationally through the Labour Party. But I must be true to myself and my values. It's been a great privilege and honour to serve my fantastic constituents in Ilford South for 27 years, and I intend to continue to represent them as a member of the new independent group.
Thanks, Mike. I'm Chukwuemeka. I'm the Member of Parliament for Streatham, the area I'm from and grew up in. As you've heard from all of the contributions, the values which have driven our decision today are shaped by who we are, where we are from, our experiences. I'm of mixed heritage. You might not be able to tell, I'm a quarter English, a quarter Irish and half Nigerian. My forebears came to this country driven by the hope and optimism that if you put the effort in, you can get on and lead a good life in Britain. My father arrived from Nigeria with no money, and he worked his way up to become a successful entrepreneur. In spite of the prejudice he experienced, the platform this country gave him to succeed was Britain at its very best. But we've had our ups and our downs. He, the only breadwinner in the family, was killed in a car crash when I was just 13. His death taught me that regardless of your circumstances, people need one another. We want our families to get on in the good times, but my gosh, we need to support each other through the bad times. Too many in Britain face barriers in fulfilling their dreams, their potential, and people don't get the support that they need. We believe it doesn't have to be that way. Fundamental change is needed. Now, the last few years have shown the established parties are simply not up to this challenge. They can't be the change because they have become the problem. They have failed to provide the leadership and clear direction which the UK desperately needs. They are deeply divided. They have failed to fulfil their duties with the competence the public rightly deserves. They've put their party political interest before the national interest, and they don't represent the complex tapestry which is modern Britain. Now, there are those who will say there is no alternative. We are doomed to be saddled with the same old politics, that we have to settle for voting for the least worst option, or, you know, simply to keep the other lot out, stop them from getting in. That no matter how incompetent they are, we have no option but to vote for these people. We reject this completely. When our democracy is failing, the British people have overcome the hurdles over history to build a better future. We demanded elected MPs take precedence over unelected lords. We insisted working men and women have the vote. We said our parliament should better reflect and look like the country in terms of gender and ethnicity, and now we have got to change our politics again. It is time we dumped this country's old-fashioned politics and created an alternative that does justice to who we are today and gives this country a politics fit for the here and now, the 21st century, not the last one. So we've taken the first step in leaving the old tribal politics behind, and we invite others who share our political values to do so too. You might come from a Labour background, but you might come from other political traditions. And yes, it's a difficult decision, make no mistake about that, but think about it. You don't join a political party to spend years and years fighting the people within it. You get involved in politics, you join a party to change the world. So we invite you to leave your parties and help us forge a new consensus on a way forward for Britain. We will sit together as an independent group of MPs in the House of Commons from here on. We haven't yet assigned roles or responsibilities between us, but we will have our first formal meeting as a new group of MPs in the coming days. We want to finish today by speaking directly to the people who send us here, the British people. For far too long, political parties in Westminster, parties of which we've been a part, have been failing you. If you're sick and tired of politics as usual, well, guess what? So are we. That's why we've done what we've done today and why we commit to do things differently. We don't have all the answers, so we'll treat people like adults and be honest about the tough choices facing Britain. We don't have the big money or infrastructure of the political parties. All we can do is direct you to our website. Please sign up. And we're asking you to help us shape what the next steps should be. Building a new politics cannot be done in committee rooms in Westminster. So we want to invite you, the British people, to join us in this endeavour. If you want an alternative, please help us build it. The bottom line is this: politics is broken. It doesn't have to be this way. Let's change it.
Thank you very much, Chuka. Before we go to the question and answers, I look forward to taking any contributions or questions you may have. We would just like to take this moment as a group to extend our thanks to our family and our friends and the volunteers that join us here today. We would also like to extend our condolences to the family and friends of Paul Flynn MP, who we learnt passed away yesterday. I'm now going to open it up to questions. Laura. There is a microphone.
There's one on that side.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, BBC News. A question really to all of you. Many of your colleagues in the Labour Party are going to feel that you have let them down. Some of them may even feel that you are betraying them by leaving, where you should be sticking together. What do you say to your colleagues and to members of the Labour Party who feel that way? And secondly, do you accept that by leaving, because of the way our political system works, that makes a Tory government more likely at the next election?
Thank you, Laura. I'm going to ask Mike to respond to that.
I made this decision, and it's a very difficult decision. After a very great effort, I did stay and I did fight. And I've been fighting battles on Twitter and elsewhere, and you see the reaction I've had over recent years. There comes a point where you have to recognise this is not the Labour Party that you were in, it has changed. And it has changed at all levels. The leader, the General Secretary, the National Executive Committee, the National Constitutional Committee, and the regional organising staff they are now appointed. This is not the Labour Party that I fought to save when Neil Kinnock was leader. It isn't the Labour Party that I fought against Trotskyists in student politics. This is the Labour Party which has changed beyond recognition. And you have to make a decision. It's not just the politics. It is whether you can feel a moral integrity to go along with things that you can no longer justify or accept. And I've come to my own breaking point. I cannot do that any longer.
Thank you. To address the second part of your question, Laura, we don't think that any of the major political parties are fit for power. And in fact, we also believe that parties do not own voters. And people up and down the country are saying to us now that they feel politically homeless. We're getting this every day. We get it in our emails, when we knock on the doors. It's happening all the time. People feel politically homeless, and they are asking and begging for an alternative. This is why we believe our politics is broken and that something has to be done to build back a politics that people believe in. And we cannot be complicit in a political system which is broken and which is failing to put the country first and put people first.
Thank you. Thanks. Paul Brand from ITV News. 2 questions. Firstly, 7 MPs might be enough for a dinner party, but not necessarily enough for a significant political party. How many others have suggested to you that they might be willing to join you? And is this designed to be a new movement? And secondly, instinctively, how do you think you are likely to vote in Parliament? Could you potentially vote with the Conservative Party on a case-by-case basis? And would you be willing to vote for the withdrawal agreement if it prevented no deal?
Gavin.
I mean, let me just pick up on the first point. Everyone's had a crack at the story, the Da Vinci Code of how many and who and what's happened. And there's a really obvious reason for that. Look, we're politicians and also human beings. We have conversations with each other all the time. And you will know from your reporting that if you talk to colleagues that aren't here today, their assessment of the situation in the Labour Party is remarkably similar to us. It is an incredibly hard judgment to come out and to make this stance today. There will be some who will see this today and will be agonising about what to do because they agree with our analysis, but it's hard to do something new. It's really hard. So look, absolutely, we might have a great dinner party with 7. I'm confident, however, that the arguments we're making, the recognition that neither of these parties are any longer fit for government, must impress on our colleagues the choice. And the choice for Labour colleagues is whether they're willing to go out and defend electing a Labour government with its views on anti-Semitism, national security, and its enabling of a hard Tory Brexit.
Just on the point that you raised, Paul, about, you know, a new movement, what have you. Look, the usual way that things are often done in Westminster is a little bit, you know, you have a podium, someone goes up and tells you how it's going to be. We're clear that there needs to be an alternative. People cannot be saddled with this appalling choice of incompetence, frankly. But the idea that you can kind of cook this up in Westminster is not the way that I think people want things to be done. So we want to invite all those, that there are millions of people who are watching what we're doing today, we believe, who feel politically homeless. But we need to get everybody involved in working out what the alternative should look like, its form, its structure. And so we're not being dishonest. Look, we think there needs to be an alternative. But for us to stand up, pontificate, declare a manifesto and all that at this stage on day one of us having just left a political party, I think would be getting a bit beyond where we need to be today.
Just on how you'd vote, sorry, instinctively, how do you think you
would on that, look,
vote with the government?
we've put out our values. You will see on our wonderful new website, theindependent.group. If I haven't got that right, Luciana will discipline me. But visit our website. You will see our list of values, who we are, what we believe, because that's where this comes from. It's about who we are, and you've heard a bit, we deliberately have told you a bit of a story about ourselves as people, because if politics isn't people, it's nothing, right? So we will decide on how we will vote on different things according to our values. And we are independent, by the way. So it might be that we have different views on different things. But the consistent point, the meeting point is our values. And like we said, it's not just Labour people who would necessarily subscribe to that. People from other political traditions. And make no mistake, it's not just Labour MPs who are privately wrestling with their consciences on this every single day. We know of lots of other members of Parliament in other parties too. The whole thing is broken, so we've got to change it.
Tom Rayner from Sky News. Would you now be prepared to fight by-elections, either by triggering them yourself or if they are brought about by constituents that are unhappy? And secondly, if you could explain why now? Was there a moment, a particular trigger for deciding to make this announcement today?
Ask Chris.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a way those two parts are answered by the same thing. I mean, we are at a time of massive national upheaval and crisis, and elections, general election, by-elections are absolutely not what is needed right now. We were elected in 2017. In our constitution, you don't just vote for a delegate with a particular party colour, you vote for an individual. And we feel that it's a fundamental principle in our parliamentary system that we use our judgment and our integrity to guide how we react to different events and circumstances. So, of course, for myself, the Brexit saga has been very much a tipping point. You know, I've been trying for a very, very long time to push and cajole and nudge the Labour Party to do what I would regard as its traditional values to point it towards, which is protecting jobs and livelihoods. But instead, we've seen a consistent attempt to put sort of political calculations above what I regard as the national interest. And that, for me, has been a tipping point. But there's a combination of issues, as you've heard today.
So there's one more at the front, then I'm going to come over to this side.
Thanks. Thank you. Andy Bell, 5 News. What do you say to those that you've basically just jumped before you're about to be pushed, that you had no place in the Labour Party and you weren't prepared to fight any more to try and change policy on a whole range of fronts? You could have stayed, you could have fought, but you've just given up.
I'll take that question, thank you. I don't think anyone can accuse any of us sat here on this platform of not speaking out and challenging what we see to be wrong and standing up for those values that we've all set out this morning. It's not easy always to speak out, particularly when, as many of us have alluded to, there is a culture which seeks to suppress that speaking out. And I certainly, when I joined the Labour Party, thought I was joining a broad church. And it's now clear that that broad church, which brought many of us into the Labour Party, no longer exists. And therefore, we have to be true to ourselves and true to our values. And it would be much easier for us if we just kept quiet and kept our heads down. But we don't believe, or I certainly don't believe, that's what I came into politics to do. We came into politics to make a change, make a difference for the communities that we are privileged to elect to represent, and to also make a change for this country. And the status quo and carrying on as normal, in my view, is just not acceptable. Gary.
Behind you. Oh, thanks. Gary Gibbon, Channel 4 News. An awful lot of echoes here with the launch of the SDP and the words that they kicked off with in their declaration. Have you learnt any lessons from what happened to them? And why aren't you launching a centre party today? Is it because you haven't had any Tories turn up yet?
Thank you. I'll ask Angela to come back on that.
Thank you, Gary. Look, I just don't think the comparison with the SDP stands up to scrutiny. This is it's a different century, and the challenges that the country faces are on a scale that I don't think we've seen at any other time in the post-war period. I said earlier that voters feel politically homeless, but they also feel very badly let down by the main political parties, all the political parties, and they do not feel adequately represented at Westminster. The feeling out there, I think, is that the Labour Party has clearly shifted to the hard left, but equally, we now see the Tory party lurching to the hard right, and the Lib Dems lost the trust of voters years ago, as we all know. So we're now in a position where I think we feel a responsibility to break away from all of that and to play our part in rebuilding trust in politics by building a movement around our values so that we can create the change to build a better future. Now, in terms of not starting as a new party, I think that what we want to do is sit as a group of independent MPs and make the appeal to the people, as Chuka did earlier, to give people out there the chance to tell us what they want to see in a new, sensible, centre-ground political movement. It's not for us to determine what that party or what any future political movement should look like. We want to hear what people have got to say.
Thank you. Theo.
Is it the case that your group has something of a shelf life to the next election? Because apart from you, Angela, you're all sitting on quite large Labour majorities. So do you feel the pressure of time to make your point in the next coming months, perhaps until 2022? And would you coordinate with the Liberal Democrats? And thirdly, have you got a leader? And if so, who's it going to be?
Okay. So, as Chuka set out earlier on, we're going to have our first formal meeting as an independent group of MPs in a few days' time, and that's the point where we'll start talking together about assigning roles and responsibilities and so forth. And at this stage, one step at a time, we've left the Labour Party today. It's a pretty big step for a lot of us to make, but we want to talk to our colleagues in Parliament. We want to talk to members of the Labour Party who, as we know, are already resigning in their thousands and have been for quite a while. So what was the first part of your question was? Do you feel the pressure of time? Well, I think I would say we've resigned for our integrity, but we haven't just left the Labour Party for our own personal gratification. We feel quite a strong sense of duty to the country at large. We could resign and walk away and do something else, as others have, but we believe to leave the people of this country without an option, essentially facing a choice between Corbynism or Europhobia, that's just not right. It's not the right thing to do. So, yeah, it may be. We'll see what happens, and there's a very healthy dose of British scepticism, quite right too, about all of these things. I entirely understand that. But the thing is, to those people who say, nothing ever changes, this is it, well, until you give it a try, you'll never really know.
Nick at the back. Oh, okay.
Can I just add something else? Thanks, Angela, to Theo's question. Let's be absolutely clear. You can't change the status quo if you're going to, if you like, rejoin it. So there are going to be no mergers. We are not going to go and join the Liberal Democrats. Let's be absolutely clear about that. We are saying there needs to be a new offer and a new alternative. And if there are other members of Parliament, regardless of their political party in the House of Commons, who identify with and share our values, we're inviting all of them to go independent and join our independent group. But this has to genuinely be something new, because the status quo is unbelievably broken. Everybody can see that.
Thank you. Nick.
I'm just picking up on what Gary Gibbons said. Sorry, I should say Nick Watt, BBC Newsnight. This is obviously a profoundly difficult moment for the seven of you. But the Gang of Seven don't look like the Gang of Four, who electrified British politics when they set up the SDP in 1981. And the reason why they did that was they had huge support in the Labour movement and huge support elsewhere. You have huge support in the Labour movement, but then they all say, not now, stay on board, fight from within. And is there therefore, in the light of that, not a danger that you're just going to be a protest group? And we know what protest groups on the centre-left do. They sustain Conservatives in power.
Well, look, if you look at this group that are in front of you, you've got diversity from across the country, diversity in background. You heard some of the stories that are there. In other words, we're trying to do something right for our age, not for the 20th century. Now, I'll try not to take too much offence at the respective judgment of whether or not we match up to the Gang of Four. It's not something that we numerically or otherwise would want to try and line up to. But let me just put this to you. You suggested to me, Nick, that actually in the Labour movement, people kind of share our assessment, but they say, not yet, hold back, hold on, one more heave, something will turn up. Something is not going to turn up. And the bottom line is this. We don't come out here and say, look at our talents, abilities, oratory. We say, look at our judgment and look at our integrity in taking what is an incredibly hard decision today. I would take that any day over a comparison with a group of people from before.
I'll take some hands over here.
Microphone.
Hi, Adam Payne from Business Insider. I'm just wondering if some of you can explain how what you've done today, and particularly the timing of it, makes another referendum, stopping Brexit, or even just softening Brexit more likely.
Well, let's be. Where's Adam? Sorry. Hi. It's a bit crowded in here. Look, we're absolutely clear where we stand on Brexit. This is a national catastrophe, and we want no part in facilitating the disaster if it happens. But what we are doing today is completely separate from the campaign organisation, which is the People's Vote, which we all wholeheartedly support. And in the end, we're not going to change the arithmetic in the House of Commons on what happens with Brexit and whether the people are given the final say on this. Ultimately, it will be the overall number of MPs in the House of Commons that will determine that. Funnily enough, actually, I do wonder whether what we've done today may actually encourage the Labour Party to do the right thing. But we're clear we've exhausted our ability to persuade the party to do the right thing. And I don't think anybody could accuse us of having sat on our hands from the beginning of this Parliament when, I put down an amendment to the Queen's speech just to provide for us to be part of the single market and the customs union, never mind the people's vote. It has been like getting blood from a stone to get the Labour Party to do the right thing by our constituents on this issue.
Thank you. Take one at the front and then I'm going to do two at the back. Put the microphone over here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Sean Dilly, BBC News at Westminster. Luciana specifically, but a brief comment from everybody if you can. You have suggested, you have suggested that the party is institutionally anti-Semitic, which is quite a serious charge, and you've also said that the leadership has failed to tackle it. Are you suggesting that Jeremy Corbyn is anti-Semitic?
I can only reflect on what has happened over the course of the 11 months, and I've come to the conclusion I have because every single step, despite, and again, I come back to the remarks I made earlier, we had the unprecedented event of a minority community in our country taking to Parliament Square to demonstrate not against National Action or a far-right organisation, but to demonstrate against Her Majesty's opposition. And in the wake of that, you would anticipate that an organisation and party that's supposed to pride itself on one of the core values of equality for all and anti-racism, that led many people to join the party in the first place, would want to do everything possible to mitigate it. And yet, if we look at what's happened over the course of now the past 11 months, at every single step of the way, whether it's us having to fight to get the international definition of anti-Semitism, with all of its examples incorporated into Labour Party policy, whether it was the fact that most recently, and again we can capture what's happened in the intervening period, the Parliamentary Labour Party passed a motion unanimously calling on the leadership to declare and be open about what's happened. And yet we've seen an obfuscation, we've seen figures that have been fudged, and you only have to look at the events of the last few weeks to hear and see how bad the situation really is. There's many different examples that have been surfaced in the press, many that haven't. And on that basis, I don't come to that conclusion lightly. I've spoken up every single step of the way, joined with many colleagues. I'm very proudly the parliamentary chair and have been of the Jewish Labour movement. But there has to come a point where, having stood outside Parliament as I did with the Jewish community, side by side, saying enough is enough. Enough really has to mean enough, and that's why I've taken this decision today.
I think it's for Jeremy. We have our views. I think we've made them clear. I think it's for Jeremy Corbyn to answer that question. But I just want to say something. As a member of, as a baptised member of the Low Church Christian community, I think it's incumbent on everyone to acknowledge the problem with anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. And we, all on this platform, stand side by side with Luciana and the Jewish community. It is not acceptable. It is absolutely sickening to see the abuse that has been piled on our Jewish colleagues in the Labour Party. And it is one of the principal reasons for our departure. We cannot stand to one side, whoever we are, whatever our religion, and see this happen within one of our major political parties. That's one of the major reasons for our departure. And we will not desert those in our community who stand under and suffer such abuse. We won't do it. We will never, ever do that, ever.
Thank you. I'm going to take 3 hands at the back, Francis, and then I don't know the microphone.
Hi, Francis Elliott, The Times. A couple of practical questions. Is there an independent group in the Lords? Will you apply for short money to develop policies? Will you declare your donations? And if people, kind of ordinary members, want to join you, they don't seem to be able to join anything. So how can they join? What will they do?
Thank you, Gavin.
There isn't an independent group in the Lords. I think we've got the room till the afternoon. So if something does happen, stick around. You mentioned around short money, it's day one. We haven't approached that conversation. There's obviously a bit of tidying up to do. Just on the issue of donations, because it is important. Look, Chuka laid out before, we don't have the infrastructure, the big money. We hired a way too small room and underwrote it ourselves, and we built a website. What happens now will be determined by those that come forward and support us. This is our commitment, though. We'll abide by any of the requirements placed on us legally, and we'll publish any large donors that give to us. But I would encourage people to go to the website where they can make smaller donations. This really is it, guys. If you want to build something new, if you agree with our values, if you think that you feel as politically homeless as us, this is the moment to try and build it. So I direct people there.
Can you pass the microphone back? Can you pass the microphone back, please? Oh, it's down. It's 2. And then Hannah next.
Hello, good morning. Michael Settle from the Herald. Isn't the biggest cheer this morning going to come from the likes of Theresa May and Nicola Sturgeon at what you've just done? And you spoke earlier on about the diversity of this group. So are you disappointed that there are no Scottish members of it?
Can I take that question?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think, as I said earlier, we believe that the entire political system is now broken, and that actually we can see, the evidence is quite clear for us all to see that there is no real, the confidence in the political system, whether it's in the Tories, in the Lib Dems or in Labour, is dwindling by the day. I've never known a period in my adult life when it's felt as though not one political party is fit for power. This is very, very different from the early 80s, and so that's why we think it's incumbent on us, morally and politically, to build an alternative. And we've had enough evidence to suggest that people out there will come forward, register their support and help us from this point onwards build a new political movement. As far as the Scots are concerned, we will be speaking to colleagues. We have been speaking to colleagues. We'll continue to speak to colleagues. And we sincerely hope that more of our colleagues will come on board at a later point.
I'll take the last question. It's from Hannah.
I think Angela's just touched on my question. It's Hannah Rothman from BuzzFeed News. My question was basically, you mentioned other colleagues from other parties thinking about potentially joining you. Are you going to be having those conversations to actively try to recruit them, or are you going to hope that they arrive at that decision themselves?
I'll hand over to Anne.
Thank you very much. I'm hidden behind this chair. We continually have conversations with people and trying to be quite open about what we think and where we think we're going. So, of course, we're hoping to recruit people from other parties. Because one of the things I particularly feel strongly about is you will see over Brexit that the party system has actually broken down. There's MPs working in a cross-party way over particular issues. The whipping system has broken down. And the reason for that is that both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party are a particular coalition within their own parties. They were broad churches. And I think that what we're saying is, given that fragmentation, that's a very good opportunity and a very good moment for people to join yet another group that perhaps reflects better what they think than the political party they are an existing member of.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid that we are out of time at this moment. I'm going to draw things to a close. But for those members of the press that are here today, some of my colleagues and I will be available for interview and further question immediately after this event. We're going to make available packs of our Statement of Independence with contact details and other information which will be available from the team. There will also be people around to answer any questions that you may have. So if I can thank you all for coming to join us this morning, and to my colleagues, thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, from the press, can you just remain seated for a moment, please? We'll explain what's happening next. Ladies and gentlemen, the press, what's happening next? We have three of the group available for interview. That will be Luciana Berger, Angela Smith, and Mike Gates. If you want to talk to Luciana, please talk to me. If you want to talk to Mike Gates, please talk to Rob Newman, who's at the back there. If you want to talk to Angela Smith, please talk to Paul, who's out in the corridor. Those are the three who are available right now. Other people will be available later in the day, okay? And you can bid in for that for later in the day. All of those staff I've just mentioned have got press packs with contact details, printouts of the statement, and other information, okay? You can select those now. The other thing that is happening at the same time, and you can choose what to do, in the room directly next door is a further press briefing where you can ask further questions, which will be starting in about 10 minutes, okay? So that's going on right now, and you choose what to do. We'll do our best to facilitate as much as we can. Okay? We'll do so.
I mean,
okay. One at a time, guys.
Paul.